before. Never.
You and me both at that point. Jeez.
The Middle with Eitan Shander, Barrett Brooks, and Harry Mays. Weekdays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern.
Welcome to the Wildwoods, the perfect place where you can safely do everything or nothing at all. Catch a wave, take a nap, go for a drive, grab a bite. It's your vacation, and we're doing everything we can to make it a safe one. The Wildwoods. Your vacation, your way.
Connecticut School of Broadcasting is now the CSB Media Arts Center, training in all that is media, including the nation's most successful broadcast training program with professional media experts whose entire mission is to get you career ready. In just 8 or 16 weeks, train on-site and online at our local campus in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. VA approved. CSB Media Arts Center. Visit gocsb.com.
The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local Union 98, is a proud sponsor of The Labor Show with J. Doc and Krause every Saturday night from 6 to 8 p.m. IBEW Local 98's highly trained and superbly skilled electricians are the best in the business, setting the highest safety standards in the electrical industry. So when you're planning your next industrial, commercial, or residential project, choose an IBEW Local 98 union contractor. Learn more at IBEW98.org.
Jody Mack, the legendary sports talker, joins forces with NFL insider John McMullen. Start your morning with Johnny Mack and Jody Mack across the JAKIB Media Network.
I was at a Phillies game there for a minute with the EA. No, I'm just right here on Bird 365 with my partner, John McMullen, joining us. We're lucky enough to have him to get his insight from yesterday's pre-draft media gathering. Martin Frank from the Delaware News Journal, good enough to jump aboard with us. Martin, how are you this morning? Thanks for coming aboard.
I'm doing well. Good morning, guys. How are you guys doing?
Hey, Martin, first off, how's the leg? I haven't seen you for a while. We don't get to jump into the room together anymore. So how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. I get to shed the walking boot next week, so I'll be ready in time for the big draft. 100% ready to go.
There we go, off IR at the right particular time. So first off, I want to get your immediate reaction to Nick Sirianni, number one. I think the energy kind of took people aback. I like the rock scissors paper analogy. I mean, I think it showed some personality and I think it was a nice breath of fresh air. I compared it to Eeyore, Howie Roseman, Andy White. It looked like they wanted to be anywhere else, but there, at least Nick put some energy into the proceedings.
Yeah, you know, the thing with Nick Sirianni that's kind of interesting. It's trying something different. I mean, you know, we're on Zoom calls pretty much every day. I mean, you know, I feel sorry for all these draft prospects, you know, going through like 32 teams, you know, probably the same questions, you know. I mean, yeah, throw them a curveball, like see if they can, you know, mix it up a little bit, see how they handle it. I mean, maybe that doesn't tell you much. But maybe, you know, when you're deciding between two guys who have like similar traits, characteristics, 40 times, you know, maybe how someone does in rock, paper, scissors competitions, you know.
I got to think about it. I call it Rochambeau. Exactly. So just use that.
But, you know, maybe that kind of like gives you a little bit more insight into a guy's competitiveness. I mean, maybe it doesn't, but, you know, it's something different, you know, it's nothing wrong with trying something new, I guess. And they certainly did. I mean, it was just a little bizarre the way it all came out. That's all.
Growing up, I was an even odds guy. So I don't know if I could show off my competitive nature with evens and odds, but that's what we did as kids in Yonkers. Here's one thing that I did learn yesterday, and it hadn't even dawned on me, and I'll point a finger of guilt at myself. Shame on me. In talking about all these Zoom meetings that they had with prospective draftees, the coach did point out And oh, by the way, no time limits. At the combine, you get to meet with the guys and you're on a clock. You got to go in there and you got to come up with the information you need out of that meeting. And then they move on, conveyor belt to the next team. And the kid gets out of the room ASAP. In these Zoom meetings, Roger Goodell isn't sitting there with a stopwatch going, oh, you talk to him 20 minutes, get off the phone. No, you can take as long as you want, as long as you keep the young man involved and entertained and you're getting something from him. That hadn't even dawned on me. Shame on me. I should have known that. But it sounds like the Eagles did a real good job at getting the information out of these guys that they could potentially draft.
Yeah, and I was actually pretty impressed with when Andy Weidel said, at the Senior Bowl, which was held in Mobile, Alabama, which I guess had probably looser COVID restrictions than, up here, they interviewed all 128 players in attendance there. And he was saying, like, in a typical year, they might interview 15 or 16. But I thought that was pretty smart because, A, they probably had a good idea at that point that, if they do have a combine, it would be extremely limited. But as it turned out, they didn't have one at all. So, they got to meet with all the, the prospects at the Senior Bowl. And then they followed up with, the Zoom calls and all that, and probably a few games of rock, paper, scissors and Jeopardy and whatnot. But, still, I mean, they got to, like, meet in person with all the candidates there. I mean, obviously it wasn't like the top juniors because it's the Senior Bowl, but, they still got to meet with a lot of prospects that maybe they wouldn't have, under normal circumstances because of the combine being canceled and everything.
Yeah, it's interesting, Martin. Right after the Eagles, Daniel Jeremiah had a conference call, and he was talking about things in this process that might change moving forward. And he mentioned the Zoom calls as something, the old top 30 visits. If you needed a linebacker, maybe you could bring in 5 linebackers. You can talk to 100 linebackers on Zoom. So Daniel said that's probably here to stay. And I think it is an interesting, we always talk about the disadvantages. I think in some ways that might turn out to be an advantage for actual scouting personnel. And that segues into the issues with the Eagles. And that's the disconnect between the scouting department and not so much the coaching staff. I think those guys are on the same page, typically, certainly in the Doug Peterson era. I expect that to continue. But then you have the scouting staff versus the analytics guys versus Howie Roseman, even Jeffrey Lurie.
Yeah.
Howie was asked, has Jeffrey changed? He said, no, same as always. But you have Jeff McClain's reporting. Jeffrey Lurie stopped it. He wanted J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. He wanted Jalen Hurts. What do you make of all this?
Well, I make of the fact that Jeffrey Lurie is the owner, and it's his money and it's his team, and he can do what he wants. I mean, it's not necessarily the right thing sometimes. I mean, as it seems to be evident with the way last year's draft went and with the Arcega-Whiteside pick 2 years ago. But you have. On the one hand, you have all these people. You have Howie Roseman. You have the analytics staff, which is something Jeffrey Lurie believes strongly in. Going back to when he first got the team in the '90s, when it seemed, that all seemed revolutionary. But you also have the scouting department, and they're the ones who are actually on the road, going to the games, meeting with their coaches, meeting with the players themselves, and everything like that. So. I mean, you have to use all these people. You can't just say, well, I don't care what all these other guys say. This is who we should pick based on the analytics and whatever. I mean, you have to take all that into account and make the best possible decision. And if the scouts are telling you to take, let's say, Justin Jefferson, and the analytics guys or the coaching staff may be saying, take Jalen Reagor because, he's faster and we need a speed guy. Well, at some point, Howie or Jeffrey Lurie, they have to draw the line and say, well, no, we know Justin Jefferson. He had over 100 catches, his last year at LSU. We know he can be a really good NFL player and we got to take him. And that didn't happen. And the year before, the same, it was the same case with Arcega-Whiteside. And, 7 picks later, DK Metcalf goes to the Seahawks, and he's one of the top receivers in the NFL. Meanwhile, JJ has 14 career catches.
Let me continue this another step. Howie Roseman, in theory, should not be on top of either the scouting staff or the analytics staff. He should be above both. He shouldn't necessarily be aligned with one more so than the other. He's the filter. All these guys giving information, and the bucket's supposed to stop with him. If you were to say Howie Roseman aligns himself with more one than the other, both of you guys, which one would you say he is? Do you think of Howie more as the head of the analytics team or more as the head of the scouting team?
Well, I would say he's more the head of the Jeffrey Lurie team. I mean, it's
exactly what I was going to say.
It's kind of what the owner wants. But I mean, to your point, Howie kind of came up through the organization. I would think he's more of the analytics team. I mean, that's kind of like, well, actually, now that I think about it, maybe the scouting team. It's hard to tell, It's hard.
And you want to know something? That could be a good thing. Because he's not supposed to really be the head of either one of them. Yeah. He's supposed to be the tiebreaker between the two.
Yeah, I mean, you look at how he's, the way he came up through the organization. He started out as, in the scouting department. He got into, the financial part of it and stuff. And I'm sure he values analytics and everything like that too. So, yeah, he should be kind of like overseeing all that. But, it comes from Jeffrey, and Jeffrey Lurie, wants to see a certain thing, and he'll say, find me this guy, I'm assuming. And that's what they do. That's how it works.
Yeah, from my perspective, I think it's as simple as the boss doesn't always have to decree something. He can make it very, very clear what he wants. And then you go and do it, and you can go out there on the podium and say, no, Jeffrey just asks questions. Jeffrey does this. Jeffrey doesn't demand we take Jalen Hurts or JJ Arcega-Whiteside, but he makes it very clear that that's the direction you should go in. I think that's the problem that's been going on with the Philadelphia Eagles. But I do want to shift gears, Martin, to we got some football knowledge as well. And probably the biggest thing, and I think this is a complete nothing burger, and that's Jalen Hurts. Refuse to name the starter. You've seen some of the spins, Martin. Is there anything, is that a big deal? Because from my perspective, it's April 21st yesterday. Who cares?
I know. I mean, but the point is, like, why not say it? Like, why not just say, yeah, Jalen's our starter going into camp. We're very excited about him. We picked him in the second round. We think he's going to be really good. That's why we kept him. That's why we traded Carson Wentz. I mean, how hard is it to say that? I mean, why say, well, we have competition in every position. We like Jalen, but, he's got to go out and earn it. I mean, yeah, obviously he's got to go out and earn it, but I mean, he should be the starter going into it. And unless he totally messes it up, I mean,
he will be, but I would argue like Fletcher Cox, I mean, like he's accomplished. He's a Pro Bowl player. He's an all-pro player. This is a second-round pick who started 4 games. I don't think he deserves that type of deference. And then the second part I would say to you is, what if by miracle, it's not going to happen, but what if Deshaun Watson's legal issues get cleared up and the Eagles say, oh, let's make a run? Or, you've seen the epilepsy news come out about Justin Fields. Maybe he falls down the board a little bit. Maybe it becomes a value at number 12. My point is, you never know what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And by the way, Martin, Jalen Hurts isn't the shrinking violet. Like, it's not going to affect him. I mean, that guy's just going to keep moving forward, working hard.
Yeah, but I would counter that by saying, how bad would the Eagles be if Joe Flacco wins the job and is the starting quarterback?
It'd be good for you.
What's that? Well, yeah, Delaware guy and stuff. But I mean, obviously he's 36 years old. He was a backup last year for the Jets, and he got to start 4 games, and we got to see, you got to see him in those games. I mean, like, what does it say about Jalen Hurts if Joe Flacco beats him out for the job? I mean, what does that say? I mean, here's the guy they picked in the second round. They traded Carson Wentz for it. I mean, why not just throw all your chips behind Jalen Hurts for this year and say he's the guy? And go forward with that, because if he can't get the job done, it says that they totally messed up with the Hurts pick last year, and they totally messed up by trading Wentz in the first place. So, where are they now? And they traded down from 6 to 12, pretty much taking them out of range of getting a quarterback. I mean, maybe one of them, like you said, falls to them, which is possible. But, I mean, you can't take that into account when you make that trade from 6 down to 12.
No.
You can't, but let's play that card. If Justin Fields comes down to number 12, do both of you guys think it's a given that the Eagles will revisit and go, hey, too much value? Yes, he was just a second-round pick when we took Jalen Hurts. He had mixed results last year when he got his chance to play. The upside for Justin Fields certainly is higher than it is for Jalen Hurts. Will they pull the trigger and make that pick? Do you think they opened that door enough that Eagle fans can go, yeah, I guess I got to watch every pick in the draft, not just tune in when the Eagles pick at 12, because I got to know if there is one of those top 5 quarterbacks that fall down to 12.
I can't see it. I mean, I think once they decided to make that trade from 6 down to 12, they said we're not going for a quarterback. Because I mean, if they wanted a quarterback, I mean, the things they should have done is traded up from 6 to 3, where the 49ers did. I mean, and then no, they're not going to get Trevor Lawrence or probably Zach Wilson, but they would have their choice between Fields, Trey Lance, and Mac Jones. And if they like one of those guys enough, you do what it takes to get a quarterback. I mean, I don't think by trading back from 6 to 12, they're going to say, oh, yeah, well, maybe one of those guys will fall to us and we'll be happy getting them there, knowing that we got an extra first-round pick out of the deal. I don't think they're thinking that way. I think when they made that trade down from 6 to 12, they realized there were a bunch of players they could get at 12 that they would be happy with that may or may not be as, in the same realm as the guys they would have picked at 6.
Right, but then I'll follow up where John went. Do you really believe there's going to be a competition between Jalen Hurts and Joe Flacco? Because they refused. They had the chance. His name was specifically brought to the table. Jalen Hurts. It wasn't like they were talking about all the guys. The Eagles decided to take it. The coach did. Competition for every position. Not going to name any starter. Well, let's talk quarterback. Why didn't you name Jalen Hurts? Do you really believe? If you believe that they've already decided, well, we're out of the quarterback draft market, we traded down, so we're not going to get one, and we're not even going to assume that one's going to fall to us. Do you think there's really is a competition between Hurts and Flacco? And if there isn't, why didn't they say that yesterday?
Yeah, that's the question I have. I mean, I can't see any scenario in which it looks good. If Flacco beats out Hurts, I mean, that's just ridiculous.
That's bad news.
And that's on so many different levels. I mean, it just says so many things about the organization. If Flacco, in fact, if there is a competition and Flacco ends up winning that competition, I mean, it's got to be Hurts's job, at least for this year. I mean, if he doesn't do well this coming season, you can kind of make the case. All right, if he doesn't do well, then likely the Eagles will likely still be really bad this year, in which case they'll still be picking in the top 10, in which case they probably will have 3 first-round picks next year, which they can use to move up to the top 2 or 3 spots if they really want a quarterback there, in which case they have to take one. But for this year, it's got to be Hurts's job. I mean, it just says so many bad things about the organization if it isn't.
Now, one of the things is, Martin, I find interesting, you've seen a number of personnel evaluators call this an historic quarterback class. It starts with Trevor Lawrence. Obviously, yeah. The Eagles had no chance to get him, no chance. They liked Zach Wilson, no chance to get him. But my question is, if you go in with that mentality, if you say, well, we've accumulated all this capital for 2022, and if Jalen Hurts doesn't succeed, we can just shift gears and go get a quarterback next year. Mm-hmm. Look, you generally don't have historic followed by historic. In other words, it's unlikely the quarterback class next year is going to be as well regarded as the quarterback class this year. So if you're already starting at 6, I agree what you said. You should go up and get the quarterback. Now, everything's about evaluation, of course. Right. So that my tea leaf says that means they want a veteran quarterback next year, whether it's Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, cleared of allegations, even in Aaron Rodgers, who might be available. Your take on that?
I would go in the opposite direction and say like they would. I don't know if like guys like Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson would be the answer. I mean, well, especially Russell Wilson, you're looking at a guy who's 33, 34 years old. And remember, like if you're trading for these guys, they've got contracts. They're going to count like $30 to $40 million against your cap. Not saying the Eagles can afford that because they can, obviously now, beginning of next year with Wentz off the books. But, at the same time, are you trying to build a team or are you trying to win now? Because, those are two different answers. If you're trying to win now, then yes, you go for the quarterback, but also you don't have 11 draft picks this year. You're just kind of plugging in holes with free agents and you're spending a lot of money and you're going in that direction. So if they're going for if they're trading for one of those quarterbacks next year, then, obviously they're not going to be big players in free agency next year because they won't have the money to do that. But if they're going to draft a quarterback next year, which is possible, then you have money to spend on free agents to plug in some of those holes. And, you can be one of the big spenders like New England was this past offseason. You can go for guys like that. And another thing about that is, when you look at the quarterbacks coming up next year, I mean, yeah, they might not have the name. Like everyone knew Trevor Lawrence would be the number one pick for the last 2 years. But, you go back to the 2016 draft when the Eagles traded up to get Carson Wentz. And I remember one of the things Howie was saying, it was, well, we didn't think the quarterback class would be that as strong next year. Well, nobody knew that Patrick Mahomes coming out in 2017 would be, the franchise player that he is. And the same for Deshaun Watson. I mean, those guys weren't really high on the radar in, the year before in the draft. So there's always guys like that. It's just a question of, whether you feel strongly enough about them. And I'm sure the Eagles have to know, like, who some of those guys coming, who might be coming out next year are. I mean, there've been speculation, on a couple of names and everything like that. I think,
Sam Howell, Slovis, you go back, Martin. You go back to this time last year. Nobody was talking about Zach Wilson. All of a sudden, somebody always emerges.
Yeah, and the year Joe Burrow was the number one pick, the year before he was the backup at Ohio State who transferred to LSU. I mean, there's always a guy like that, is what I'm saying, and those guys
always is. But I will say,
but then again, Jared Goff and Carson Wentz went 1-2, and neither one of them is with their team anymore. They've both been traded. So where you're picked in the draft and how much steam is on you before the draft is all well and good, but then you have to come into the league and perform. We tie where everyone talked them up to, and or their name gets called out in that first round to whether they're going to be great quarterbacks or not. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So we can all sit here and run down the list and put Spencer Rattler in there from Oklahoma too. None of us know. And it's a question mark. Same thing as, I'm a huge Justin Fields fan. I'm sitting here praying for the Eagles that he falls down to 12. I think he's got a chance to be a star quarterback. Who knows? Maybe he's a bust. That's why they opened the door crack yesterday to make Eagle fans think, just if all the chips line up exactly right, we could still be a player in the quarterback market this offseason. I think Fields is the only guy where that actually comes into play.
It's interesting because I was on a conference call with Mel Kiper earlier in the week, and it turns out the hit rate on quarterbacks in the first round is like 50%. So he's like, you take these top 5 guys, and 2 of them aren't going to pan out. One's going to be a disappointment. One's going to be a total bust. So who are those guys? I mean, we don't know. Is it Trey Lance? He's played 1 game in the last 2 years. I mean, is it Fields? I mean, he was great against. He was great in the semifinal game against Clemson, but he was he was bad against like Indiana and Northwestern and stuff like that. I mean, you never know. I mean, maybe Trevor Lawrence's shoulder doesn't heal properly. Maybe he continues to have trouble with that like throughout his career. Zach Wilson, I mean, he never really played, tough competition this past year at BYU. I mean, there are all these variables that you can throw in there that kind of makes it seem like, there are 5 quarterbacks who will probably go in the top 10, but does that mean all 5 will succeed? No, it doesn't.
And I always say, Martin, it doesn't end when you hand the card in. You don't get a good quarterback or a bad quarterback. A lot depends on the coaching staff, where they go to, the scheme, how they're used. They're obviously supporting cast, so it doesn't end. But I think all three of us agree at number 12, the Eagles aren't taking a quarterback. So what are they taking? Let's get into that.
All right. Well, I mean, if you look at their most glaring need or something, they need a cornerback, who can plug in and play right away opposite Darius Slay, because obviously that's a major weakness for them. They also need a wide receiver based on their, past mistakes and everything like that. So, it's a matter of who's available. I mean, if Devontae Smith is there and you look at it and you say, well, the guy weighs 166 pounds. I mean, is he going to be able to hold up in an NFL, typical NFL season? Or do you look at a cornerback? Does Patrick Surtain, fall down to there? I mean, probably not. But then you're looking at J.C. Horn. You're looking at Caleb Farley. I mean, he just had the back surgery. Do you take a chance on another cornerback who's coming off an injury, has an injury history? I mean, they tried that with Sidney Jones in the second round in 2017, and that kind of blew up in their faces. So I would say, if it's a choice between, a top wide receiver like Devontae Smith or even Jalen Waddle, I would think they go wide receiver first and then cornerback in the second round. But that's, that's just my opinion.
And you've got to admit, yesterday, the coach got excited talking about receivers. We know that's his background. He shook the table talking about receivers, which I thought was exciting and telling. Yeah, he talked about receivers come in different sizes and different packages. I read into that if Devontae Smith does fall down to 12. And I've seen a bunch of mocks where that's the case. It wouldn't be on my mock. If I were a team drafted in the top 5, I'd be calling his name out. Same with Justin Fields. I have to just happen to be a big fan of both of those players. But if he falls down, I don't think the Eagles are going to be one of those teams that say, yeah, but he's only 166 pounds. Right. I think they're going to take the player because he's a good football player and not worry about size. I'll tell you, the guy who looked like the prototypic new millennial wide receiver, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, when they took him 2 years ago. How's that worked out? Not too well. So that's why I think Devonta Smith is the choice if he's there at number 12.
I personally agree with you. And I was kind of trying to read between the tea leaves of something else that Howie said. He's talking about wide receivers. And I actually asked him, why the hit rate, in the first round especially, is so questionable on these wide receivers. And he was saying that one of the things is that, when you're a wide receiver in college, you're going against maybe the third or fourth. At times, you're going against the third or fourth cornerback in college, but the third or fourth cornerback in college is not going to play in the NFL. And the reason why that might not necessarily apply to Devontae Smith is because, he played at Alabama. I mean, they played in the SEC. They played against, teams like LSU and all that. And, they were up against top competition. I mean, you saw what he did in the first half of the championship game against Ohio State. I mean, Ohio State doesn't have bad cornerbacks. I mean, those guys, will either have a chance or should play in the NFL. I mean, he had 215 yards in the first half against Ohio State in the championship game. I mean, he had a season that he had, against really good competition. And that doesn't necessarily apply. So that doesn't necessarily apply what Howie Roseman said about a guy like Devontae Smith. I mean, so, I agree. I think if he's there at 12, he would be the top choice. I mean, I think he's one of the group of players the Eagles are targeting. And you also have to keep in mind, the top 3 picks will be quarterbacks, and it's possible that 2 more will go, sometime in the top 10. So really that leaves you 7 non-quarterback prospects, at number 12. So that's really they're picking in the top 7, basically, with their 12 picks.
From
the other 5
position players.
Yeah.
And last one for me, Martin, because I know you got to run. But first of all, I want to tell everyone to read Martin at DelawareOnline.com, the Delaware News Journal. Every time I have Martin on one of my shows, I say Joe Biden's favorite newspaper, The President. of the United States. So
loyal subscriber.
I do want to bring up the Eagles' history. You know, Jody knows I've been preaching this. In the entire Jeffrey Lurie era, whenever this team is in the top half of the draft, so 16 or above, it's been quarterback, offensive line, or defensive line. They have never once wavered. You got to go back to 1988 when they chose somebody other than a quarterback, offensive, or defensive lineman when they are in the top half of the draft. Why does that change? Just because of the board? Or do the Eagles say, you know what? We need an edge rusher. Brandon Graham's 33. Derek Barnett's on a contract year. Josh Sweat's on a contract year. It might not look like an immediate need, but it's going to be a need real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's a Kwity Paye, you're a Michigan guy. You know, if they have to drop back to make it more value-centric, you know, do the Eagles default to their DNA when it comes down to this pick?
Yeah, I would say no, because the one thing that has changed over all those years is the importance of the wide receiver and the cornerback. I mean, it's a passing league now. So, yes, if you're drafting, you know, you can get a quarterback if that's your guy, but it's also the sign of the times. I mean, you have to be able to throw the ball, you have to be able to catch the ball, and then on the other side, you have to have a guy who can stop the other team from throwing deep. So I think it's changed. I mean, they haven't drafted in that top spot in, you know, very often. I mean, you go back to Brandon Graham, that was 2010. You go back to Fletcher Cox, that was 2012. Yeah, they chose Derek Barnett in 2017, but, you know, we're talking, what, 3 times in the last 12 years they're picking in the top.
And I will admit they did want Christian McCaffrey that year, but they, you know, he wasn't going to fall to 14.
Right. And yeah, I think they looked into trading up to try to get him and everything. Yeah. So, I mean, it's different now. I mean, I think there's a lot more emphasis on quarterbacks. I mean, teams don't even give quarterbacks a long time to like develop anymore. I mean, a guy like Aaron Rodgers sitting for 3 years before taking over. I mean, that's history. I mean, the Eagles gave up on Carson Wentz and they had to pay him like, you know, he counted $34 million against their salary cap. So, you know, you want like immediate results right now. And if you think that there's a wide receiver or a cornerback there, I mean, those are the 2 most important positions for the Eagles right now. And those are the 2 positions they have to address. I mean, yeah, I mean, someone, you know, they could go defensive line, but I think the only way that happens is if, you know, Smith or Waddle or you know, one of the cornerbacks are gone by then, and they value like someone like, you know, Kwity Paye or even Jalen Phillips or Gregory Rousseau higher than, you know, the other guys who are still remaining. I think, you know, it's a possibility, but I think that's like number 3 on their list of priorities at that point.
Here's why Martin's right, that they're going outside rather than inside. John and I are going to argue about this all the way up until next Thursday night. Jeff Lurie, I believe, will have his fingerprints all over this draft again. And Jeff Lurie is all about offense and electricity and being able to spread the field. And he doesn't care about defensive linemen. No, come on. He might care a little bit about cornerback, because they have to stop those wide receivers and quarterbacks who he's all about. So I think you're right. My last question is Jeff Lurie related, tying back into the president of the United States. Do you think when Jeff Lurie asks his questions in the meeting and on draft night, he wears an earpiece so that Alex Halaby can help him out with the questions that he has to ask to Howie Roseman and or the scouting staff? Or is Jeffrey just that good that he can do it off the top of his head?
I think Jeffrey like gets all these printouts and stuff like that. You know, it's like in A Beautiful Mind where you see like all these mathematical equations like going on the screen and everything like that as he's looking at it and stuff. And I don't know. I think Jeffrey kind of sees himself that way. And, you know, if Alec Halaby is reading off these algorithms and mathematic formulas and Pythagorean theories and stuff like that, Jeffrey's like, yeah, tell me more. Who should we take? I don't know.
Martin Frank says, if you've got emotional intelligence, you don't need an earpiece. Basically, that's what it comes down to. Martin, great stuff. Appreciate you hopping on board with us. Thanks for a couple of minutes. You know, we'll be punching you up again real soon.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
We will do it again. Martin Frank from the Delaware News Journal, the choice of newspaper of the President of the United States. He's my partner. He's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. We'll take a time out here, come back, set up hour number 2, including a confab with our buddy, former Eagle offensive lineman Barrett Brooks, co-host of The Middle, is going to jump aboard with the Mac and Mac guys on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.